And we're halfway live, maybe.
We just let it roll till it's live. Hang on, everybody. We're waiting for LinkedIn to catch up.
Should we talk about the weather?
It's beautiful weather out there.
It is warm in Denver.
All right. Is it hooked up?
Well, let's just go.
Let's just go. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Radar. I am Rachel Lee, COO of the Canthal Group, executive coach and specializing in women's leadership coaching, and Darren Canthal, our CEO. He is our executive coach and our resident dad joke. What do we call you?
Resident comedian.
How about wannabe comedian?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll take that.
Yeah. All right. You're our wannabe comedian with our daily or weekly dad joke. Okay. So today we are talking about something that I don't think is discussed enough in leadership coaching in companies, corporations, entities, and that is your emotions. Most of us are told to check your emotions at the door, and that doesn't work. And what we're going to teach you is that when you understand the multitude of emotions that an individual has, when you know how to use them for your advantage and for your betterment of life, career, parenting, whatever it may be, they are one of the greatest tools that you can give yourself, just overall from how you experience life. So we're going to go into different tools that we use, such as the model, some emotional abdication. Darren has positive intelligence, so he's a practitioner with positive intelligence. And we're going to show you why you need to know this, not just for yourself, but also to lead your team. And before we do that, Darren's going to tell us the dad joke.
Did I tell you I saw Captain Hook at a secondhand store?
No.
That's the joke. Do you get it? I don't think you get it.
I get it. Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, I get it. Not that dense. I'm gonna fix my.
Well, that was pretty good.
It is a good one. I like that one.
I'm gonna make a shout out. My man Doug Phelps in my networking group, the DAB. He has recently been telling me some dad jokes that are true dad jokes. That was one of them he told me yesterday. I thought that was good.
Keep getting them from Dan.
Doug,
keep getting them from Doug. All right, let's dive in. Okay. Emotional regulation, emotional awareness. I work a lot with this with my clients. And when we talk about our experiences with our clients, maybe you less so, or am I making that up?
It's different.
It's different. Okay. Yes, it's different. So talk about how you use it.
Let me tell a couple stories. So the first is
shocking.
Shocking. I love stories, right? When I work with clients, what I often say to them is, we don't necessarily need to go to the depths of your emotions like we're in therapy, but it is important to know how you're doing, and then what do you do when you're doing that way, right? Like for me, I default to anger, and you could probably describe better than I can how you experience me when I am angry. The second part to this story goes back to when I got divorced in 2013, and I was with my therapist, Christine, and we were about a third of the way through therapy. And the way I tell the story is she cracked my outer shell. And I don't remember what she did or what she said, but it was like for 2 weeks, I was just crying, like not sobbing uncontrollably, but driving the car, petting Marvin, listening to music, reading billboards. Like it didn't seem to matter. I was crying all the time. And the next time I saw Christine, I was like, you broke me. Like I can't make a move without crying. And her response was that I had this wide range of emotions, but I didn't have the vocabulary to describe them. And because I didn't have a vocabulary, I was always angry or happy, right? And anger was, I was pissed off. And this is where I started to learn later is I was impatient. I felt provoked. I was insecure, right? So these things started to expand my vocabulary. And, when you prompted the question about how I work with my clients, is a lot of my clients don't have the vocabulary. And so they just know they're okay or they're fine or angry or something. And then when they're in that spot or feeling that emotion, they have these auto responses or behaviors. And that's the thing that we focus on. How are you doing? And then what do you do when you feel that way?
Why do you think that that's so important?
Well, speaking for myself was that because I defaulted to anger, and that anger was a mask for insecurity, the insecurity told me that I was unworthy. The only way that I was worthy was to quote unquote be right. And the only way I could be right is by you telling me I'm right or acknowledging I'm right. And that often showed itself as I proved that I was smart enough or I had the best idea in the room. Now, what I didn't realize was that if you were not acknowledging my worth, I fought with you. In corporate America, someone would criticize me, tell me they had a different idea, didn't think my idea would work. And instead of me brainstorming and being curious and collaborating, I would then fight with you to say, no, you are wrong and I am right. And you need to tell me that. Now, I didn't know that I was behaving that way because I was insecure and my worthiness was tied to it. I just thought I was angry. Right. So the importance is there's something deeper going on. And without knowing how you're doing, i.e., how you're feeling and having the vocabulary, your auto responses, my auto responses were self-sabotaging. Right. I got fired from almost every job I had because that behavior would come out. It would be consistent. I'd wear out my welcome. People would not be whatever, approving or accepting of that behavior. And then soon enough, I'd make myself expendable.
Yeah. What you were just saying there about how other people around you had to behave in a certain way in order for you to feel worthy, or had to validate you in order for you to feel right. So that is what I call the emotional abdication. So before we started this conversation, everyone, Darren was like, I don't understand this emotional abdication. And I've coached to it quite a bit. And it's when our emotions, we allow our emotions to be dictated upon how we think other people should behave or respond. And if they don't behave or respond in the way that we think that they should or we want them to, then we feel X. We feel disrespected. We feel anxious. You felt unworthy. That's you abdicating over your emotions to somebody else, and you will never, ever, ever win. Because only you are responsible. Only you were responsible for that anger and that auto response. Only I am responsible for, well, most people tell me that I don't have a lot of used to tell me that I don't have a lot of emotions. I'm icy. I'm cold-hearted because I don't go around expressing them openly and abundantly. I just had a very small buffet of emotions to choose from. So that's emotional abdication, and we can talk about that later. But that's what you just said there is exactly what I was talking about before we started today. Okay, so go ahead.
Let me say, you and I talk about this sometimes at home, which is either no one makes you feel a certain way, right? Your feelings are your own. Now, granted, someone may influence the way you feel, but you feel what you feel based upon what you feel. And then, sometimes when we have our arguments, well, I get to be angry, right? And then we have that discussion, which is, I don't need you to remind me that you get to feel a certain way. But it is funny. The long-winded way is to say that a lot of us say, you made me feel X. And
that is emotional abdication.
yes. And that's what we coach to is nobody made you feel that way.
Correct.
Period.
Correct. And what I teach to or coach to is if you can identify that feeling, the feeling will always stem from a thought or perspective that you have about a specific person or circumstance or situation. So the feeling, what precedes that feeling is your thought. So most people don't recognize that they are not only in control of and choose their feelings, but they are also in control of and choose their thoughts. They think that every thought that's just running through their brain is truth. And if you let that be truth, right, then you're going to we know these people. They're all over the place. They're high, they're low, they're in between, they're over here, they're over there. They're just kind of, I don't want to say a disaster because that's not true, but they don't feel stable. It doesn't feel secure. You never know what you're going to get. And it is true in leadership at home and with parenting, that's a very unsettling place to be for the people around you, because you never know what you're going to get. And so now you're constantly, as the receiver, you're constantly preparing yourself. There's a lot of energy spent on, well, what is he going to be like today? How is he going to respond to that? Is she going to be crying in the meeting? And then the focus becomes around managing the individual and their emotions and not at the actual task or problem at hand. And that is super exhausting. I think about that being married. Like my ex-husband and I, we did not have emotional intelligence, language, or communication skills to get through some of our problems. And so we were constantly in reactionary mode. And the focus was on these emotions, not on how to support the relationship and us as individuals, the identity, our individual identity, and focus on the task at hand.
All right, 3 comments.
Cool.
The first is you were saying that a thought precedes the emotion. And I agree with that. It's a yes and. The more attuned that I become of how I'm doing is the more that I recognize the body sensation that precedes the thought and the emotion. Or like I carry pressure, tension, sensation in my chest, my jaw, and I make a fist or I shrug my shoulders. That is the signal that something is going on. It's usually stress, anger, impatience, irritation. Those are the things I usually recognize. So long-winded way to say is the body sensation is also a clue.
Yes.
Second thing is I second what you're saying about arguing the response as opposed to the topic at hand, right? This has been the story of my life is that, I get angry and then I bark. And the thing that I got angry about becomes secondary to the bark. The argument then becomes like, why did you bark at me? Why did you scream at me? Why? And then I get annoyed because we lost track of the thing that I'm upset with, which is the actual topic. But because I didn't have emotional control, we're now arguing about my response. God, it drives me nuts. And I have a client of mine that we have similar anger associations. And he told me recently that he has been doing such a better job of controlling his anger. And he's watching how people at home and at work are now responding different. He thinks they were expecting him to lose his temper and he didn't. And they're like, oh, all right, well, now what do I do? So it was a really, really cool conversation. The other thing I wanted to say is I saw this post from Adam Grant, who is, exceptional with his language and he's concise and articulate. And what he was saying was something about like wisdom is the ability to recognize every thought that you have is not truth. And then he went on, the way he wrote was so much better than I'll say it. But from that wisdom, we know not to act, react, or behave based upon that untruthful thing our brain is telling us. Does that make sense? Did I explain that right?
The way that I coach to it is that, yes, you have millions of thoughts throughout a 24-hour period of time. Every single one of them cannot be true. They are just thoughts. It's just your brain doing what human brains do. And the key is to get a little bossy with your brain, to boss it around, because if you know that every thought can create a feeling and an action, right? It's like, what's the spark plug? Do we have those in cars anymore? Or is that only diesel? Clearly, this is not my area of expertise, but it's like the spark plug, right? Like you have to decide which one you're going to turn on to create a specific outcome and the whole chain that happens during that process: thought, feeling, action, outcome. Not every single thought is worthy or valid or true. So I love the word discerning. You must become very discerning with which thought you are going to choose to respond to. And then you get to even say, there's so much control here, which none of us have been taught. And I love control, you know this. But you even get to decide, like, how do I want to feel about this certain situation? If you have a team member that just isn't performing or blatantly ignores your request as a leader, you could either walk into that meeting and have this auto response, this habit of being yourself, or you can decide, how do I want to respond to this? How do I want to feel about this person and this situation? And ultimately, what is the outcome that I'm looking for? Because even if you don't like the feeling that comes with it, if that feeling is the currency to get the outcome, you still have to do that because that's your job. So whether you're at home, you're with your kids, or you're leading your team, you must be discerning with your thoughts. You must choose not to believe every single one of them and choose the ones that are important, because it also will create the feeling. So do you want to, like when we're fighting, do I want to feel angry at you? Do I want to feel disappointed? Do I want to feel anxious? Or do I want to look at what is really going on here, root cause, and choose how I want to feel? Because we know if you connect, if you have understanding, if you're in your prefrontal cortex and not in this primitive brain where I'm like, wanting to club you or running out of the cave, we can connect better and we can have a better outcome.
Yeah, I want to say one other thing on what we're talking about, which is so many of us run on autopilot, and I'll just speak to myself, right? I run on autopilot and I get angry. That's my default. And then if I were to ask myself, why am I angry? The first thing is because of the specific thing, right? Leaving dirty dishes on the counter. That's what makes me angry, which it does, right? But what's beneath it? And that's what a lot of us don't explore. Like, why am I actually, like, who gives a shit about plates on the fucking counter? Sorry, I'm cursing now. Because in the grand scheme of life, it does not matter. But if I then react from that anger, I make it an important thing. And now all of a sudden there's a fight in the house. I'm annoyed, you're annoyed, Lila's annoyed, whoever, like it just becomes this big domino effect. So it's a long-winded way to say that so many of us just do what we do without a lot of thought about why we do it, what's behind it. And that's the exploration. That's the importance of knowing that I'm not just angry, I'm insecure. And the reason I'm insecure is because I don't think I'm worthy enough. And why don't I think I'm worthy enough? Well, I don't know that answer, but then I tied my worth to intelligence and being right, and that was my fight. And what was really interesting as I've done my own exploration is ultimately what I wanted was to have a voice. And I took my own voice away because I was so focused on being right. That was the self-sabotage. It wasn't just the behavior and the reaction. Like I wanted to have a voice and I took it away. That was the self-sabotage.
How do you see that sabotaging leaders' careers?
Good coaching question.
Thank you.
A lot of leaders have, it's the same thing. Leaders have auto responses, auto triggers, auto things. And when we work with our clients, that's part of what we do. Right? It's one of the things that I talked to early in my relationship with clients, which is which are your default emotions that you're aware of? Oh, you don't have a vocabulary? Here's a cheat sheet. And if anyone listening wants this cheat sheet, ask. It's called the Wheel of Emotions. I've got a few representations of it that I'm happy to share. And so that's the first thing. Like, what are these default emotions? And then when you feel those default emotions, how do you respond? Now, interestingly, most people default to how they respond at home, which is also something we've talked about, which is definitely not spoken about in any leadership training I've ever been through, is how is your home life and how does home affect work?
I want
Anyway,
to add to that real quick, then you can go back to your story. It's how the home life is attached. And I was having this conversation with one of our clients is if you are also client customer facing, it'll also impact how you work with and handle your customers. So for anybody out there whose livelihood is dependent upon your client base, your customer base, like this is so important because you can't have an auto response with them. Like you could, let me know how that works out. You're not going to teach, or we hope, what we think will happen is we think that most people will not treat a client or a team member the way that they treat their spouse or their kids. And that's not true. How you behave in one area of your life is how you behave in all other areas. Now, it might be soft, it might be veiled, but it's still there. And that will impact everything in your life. Okay, now go back to your story.
We have a fellow coach, Deneen, is chatting with us on the LinkedIn, and she's given us the affirmatives. Yes. She's in agreement with us. Thank you, Deneen.
Okay, so before you go back to your story, so I'm going to keep going, okay?
I forgot my story, so you can just keep going.
That's what I thought. So I'm throwing you a lifeline right now.
Thank you.
Listen, most people are not taught from the get all the different types of emotions and the meanings behind the emotions and how they might feel in your body and how they show up in your life, right? Mad, sad, angry, glad. That's pretty much, maybe fear. That's what we're taught. At least that's what I was taught growing up. And I was taught you definitely did not speak to those emotions. And 100% you never brought them into work. Now, I agree to a point. Okay, so let's talk about how you as a leader, as anybody, okay, but we speak to leaders. Let's talk about how you can process, because you're going to have these emotions, okay? So number one is learning to identify what the emotions are. And one of the tools that I do with my clients is at the end of the day, bare minimum, write down what were your top 3 emotions of the day. And if you need that cheat sheet, the feelings wheel, we'll put it in our notes here. That is first step, bare minimum, just putting a name to them. Now, if you can go next level, the question is why? Like, why did you experience that emotion? So-and-so did this. I didn't complete this. My child was crying or had a struggle. Identify why that emotion is there. Okay. I believe that we should not go into our jobs and just be completely emotionally dysregulated. So in order to give them space to breathe, for you to understand them, for you to have time to process them, you have to do that outside of your work. And that means you actually have to look at these emotions and you have to experience them in advance. I always say that, in advance. You know certain emotions are going to come up with certain people in certain situations. And so your job is to experience them. I don't like the word desensitize to them because I don't think that's true with emotions, but experience them in advance so that way you know how to work through them. So when you go into the office, then you're not reactionary. You have the skill set. You have, it's like, the first time you give a speech, how you're really, really nervous, but after you give a speech 100 times, you're just not as nervous anymore. That's what we're trying to do. Huh?
You get reps and practice.
you get reps in practice. So you're not so reactionary. But most people, full circle, are not taught to talk about, evaluate, understand, hear the wisdom and the information that these emotions have. And when you don't do that, that's when you blow up. When you're in the stressor, you're going to blow, and you're going to be habitual, and you're going to be reactionary.
What I'm hearing and what I talk to some of my clients about is we have to disrupt the pattern.
Yes.
And I'm not a brain scientist, as we all know, but there is some brain science with disrupting the pattern. If my auto response from anger is to bark and get offensive and scream and yell, I need to figure out and get some reps not doing that. The first place to start is to think about what it's like to be angry and not lose my shit. And that can be a rep in and of itself. To your point, I think, or part of what I hear you saying is to be preemptive with, okay, I know I get angry based upon these triggers, right? What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does it mean to me? What are the whys? Like, so there's true curiosity and exploration of my own anger and auto responses. Then recognizing, okay, I'm going into a situation which might have historically made me angry, and think through that. And then when I get there, recognize clues, thoughts, body sensations that precede the anger, and be like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get angry. What am I going to do to mitigate?
You have to have a plan. You have to have experience, you have to have a plan, and you have to be willing. You have to be willing to look at your own shit. And look, emotions are not shit, okay? 100%. But you have to be willing to look at, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking this way? Challenge that thinking. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What is it telling me? What do I need to do differently here? Too often, especially with, I think, the women that I work with, I guess I can't say, I think everybody does this, man, women, it doesn't matter. We bury emotions. I had a client say to me, I think that my autoimmune condition was created because I have spent my entire career stuffing down my emotions. Emotions have energy. Emotions create chemicals in the body. Emotions will impact your hormone levels, not just your sex hormone levels. Emotions will create inflammation or reduce inflammation depending on the emotion. Okay. And so it will impact you not just at work and with your relationships, but also with your health. So the tool that I use to understand this, because I will ask my clients, well, how do you feel about that? And they will respond with a thought. It's very rare that the clients that I work, because they've been in go mode, they're in do, they're action oriented. They're like, I don't have time to cry. I don't have time to feel and be all soft kitty. Like, let's freaking go. But what they're doing is they're bypassing the emotion, and they stuff it until it does burst. So one of the tools that I use, which a lot of coaches out there know this, is called the model. It's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And anybody can do this. You can think of the situation or the circumstance. You can think about, like, Darren. You just put their name up there. Okay, Darren, what are my thoughts? My thoughts are, I'm really frustrated that he loses his temper when we don't agree about things. Then how do I feel about that? I feel sad. What happens when I feel sad? And then you can start going through this, and you can be very clear. Well, when I'm sad, I shut down. I don't reach out. I go internal. I don't connect. I get a little depressed. I get a little tired. I skip my workouts. And the outcome is that we are not connecting and moving our relationship or our business forward. And so you can go through this whole process with every single situation that you are being presented with, to start to understand, well, how do I want to think instead? Because that's not a true thought that I have about you. I could choose that thought. I could choose a different thought. So that is one of the tools that I teach. And when you have that tool, here's exactly what my clients say.
Let me stop you.
Yes. I
Explain the
know. See,
tool.
you're so much more succinct, and I
No,
go
no,
on these stories and ramble.
you didn't explain the tool.
It's
Give the
called the
very
model.
base. Yeah, just give the very basic overview on the model.
It's the model. It's your thoughts create your feelings drive your actions get you your results in life. If you don't like the result that you're getting, then go upward in the model and figure out what needs to change. Usually, what needs to change is your perspective of the situation. And you can change any thought. You don't have to choose that thought. Remember that. That's where you need to be discerning. Pick a different thought that's going to get you a different outcome.
All right, let me add this. So this is one of the most basic ways to start changing a thought, which is the acronym is API. Assume positive intent. So when you, Rachel, me, everyone listening, is when you have a negative thought about someone or even yourself, the thing to change is assume they had positive intent or assume I had positive intent and then see what that does. Even if you don't believe it, right? Because one of my thoughts is that things are being done to me because people are out to get me in some way. Like you purposely left those dishes on the counter to piss me off, which is ridiculous. Because if that is true, then that was preemptive. It's pretty sinister and a whole bunch of other negative things, right? But if I assume positive intent that you ate real quick and you just put it there, or you had every intention of doing it later, or something positive, it changes my whole demeanor and my thought process and my emotional state, etc. So long-winded way, when you're thinking about changing a thought, assume positive intent.
And I think it's important to say that we are not advocating that you go through your life only experiencing positive emotions. So we're not saying you have to be Pollyanna. We're not saying there's anything wrong with negative emotions. They are all welcome. They are all necessary. It's just who is leading the charge. So the way I explain it is like think of your emotional life as a bus, and every emotion gets a seat on the bus, but you're in the driver's seat. They all have wisdom. Every emotion has a purpose. They all carry information. Where we get into trouble is when we take one of those emotions and we put them in the driver's seat and we just kick back and we're like, what? That's just the way I am. Oh, it's just how I feel. See, so and so did that. And then that bus of, let's say, insecurity is driving you around town. It's not getting you where you want to go in life. You're now a complacent passenger. Get in the driver's seat. Every emotion has a seat. Use them as wisdom to get to where you want to go. Okay, you got to say something because I have to look through some notes real quick because there was something that I wanted to bring up.
Well, as you're talking about the bus, it reminds me of the Two Wolves story, which I love, right? And some of us benefit from having these models and thoughts or things to reference. So the Two Wolves story is, as I understand, is an old Cherokee story. And a grandfather is talking to his grandson and says, within all of us, there are two wolves, and they're constantly at battle. One wolf is rooted in negative thoughts and emotions, shame, guilt, anger, insecurity, whatever else. And then the other wolf is steeped in positive emotion and thoughts, love, compassion, empathy, creativity, adventure. And every day these two wolves are battling out. And the grandson asks his granddad, well, which wolf wins? And granddad says, whichever one you feed. So if you feed the negative wolf, that's going to drive the bus. That's going to drive your mind, which is going to dictate your actions. And if I think for myself is when I fed that angry wolf and then I'd bark at people, right? That was self-sabotaging. I didn't get promoted. I didn't earn friends and favors. I burned a lot of bridges, so on and so forth. But on the flip side is when I would feed the positive wolf, which at my best leans into curiosity and a seeking to understand. I have to be really mindful of the cadence of my speech, and the volume. Right? So at my best is I recognize I'm starting to get angered. I try to feed that positive wolf. I think about talking slower and lower, and I have little talk tracks like, oh, that's curious. Oh, I wonder. What if we thought of this, right? Whatever it is, something to try to chill me out, and then deliver the next thing I say slower, calmer, not as loud.
It's great behavioral modification. It's awareness and behavioral modification. Oh, good job. I want to add to the wolf feeding. Which wolf are you going to feed? Because unfortunately, I think that a lot of people are feeding the negative wolf right now. And there's a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, anger. We've talked about this, just driving. People are so angry. You know, the big guy, the guy with his big old monster truck giving me the finger because I just wanted to go get gas and I didn't put my blinker on time. Like everybody's so angry. And that anger has a butterfly effect on the rest of the individuals around you. And it just creates more anger in the world. So a little woo-woo there, right? But what I was thinking about when I was doing the notes to this is if we're feeding this negative wolf, how do we feed the positive wolf? How do we get more positive emotions? How do we experience more things in life that will fulfill the positivity, the joy, the happiness, the love, the connection, the confidence? And I think this is where everybody obviously has to do their own exploration. But for me, I was thinking about okay, well, when I am in this negative state, what do I do that I know will feed some positivity? And so for me, it's exercise, being in nature. We tried to go camping over the weekend. And even though that was miserable and cold and wet and disappointing, it was still like, I remember the bluffs that we saw and the fresh air and the campfire coffee. And it was hard, but it still was a positive hard, if that makes any sense. I know that connection, for me, I love gardening, being outside in the sun, getting away from my environment. So even like taking the action or understanding, I call them minimum baselines, have 3 minimum baselines that when you know you're falling into this negative habitual response, go do those 3 things to help pull you out. Sometimes we just need to clear, right? To clear what's going on in our brains to get an understanding of, oh, this is why I'm feeling this way. And then that puts you back in charge of what emotions you want and how you want to experience life. Because let's be real, we experience life through our thoughts and our emotions. And so you can choose feed the wolf that's bringing in the negativity or feed the wolf that's bringing in the positivity. Don't ignore both. But remember that you have more control over this than just what you think you do. Joe Dispenza calls it, you have to break that, he says, you have to learn to break the habit of being yourself. And I love that because we are all habitual human beings. So those are just some things that came up. Not talking about work is another one. And of course, coaching, therapy, connecting with friends. Find your things, though, that help bring in more of this positivity. Because when you do that, then you're going to be a better leader. And people are going to want to be around you because your energy isn't all negative and sucky. And your family is going to be around you. And you're going to find better solutions. And you're going to make decisions not from this emotional dysregulation. Life is better when you understand your emotions and you know how to guide them and use them and why they're there and you learn from them.
How much you had in your notes?
I have lots of notes, but that was it.
One of the things that what I seem to do for myself and additive to what you just described, like know those activities that help you feed that positive wolf. I think of some external gestures at times, like the paying it forward type of thing. We've talked about this. I find being in an elevator such an interesting social experiment because whoever's in the elevator, right, we're in this enclosed environment. And how often do people even talk to each other in the elevator? But we're all standing there. We know we're in there together. So anyway, one of the things I'll do is I'll sometimes look at somebody, shoes, shirt, something, and make a positive comment, which helps me feed my positive wolf. Sometimes I think about, what am I not saying to you, to friends, and not the negative stuff going through my mind, but what's something positive that I'm thinking about that I'm just not speaking. And sometimes I'll speak it. So just a couple of things that are worthwhile to feed that positive wolf.
I think to wrap it up is, number one, most people are not taught to understand their emotions, and just that. Here's the emotions. Here's what they mean for you. You do not have to react to them. Okay. I just want to be really clear. It sounds kind of crappy, but if you're running around as an adult, living your life in response to your emotions, that's not emotional maturity. That's what children do. That's why they lose their shit in the candy aisle when they want whatever, the Kit Kat, and you say no. Okay, adults do the same thing, just in a little bit of a different way. So this is not something that is typically taught, and yet it is probably one of the most important things to understand if you want a better life. I genuinely believe this, and believe me, I am here raising both hands saying I was not taught emotions. Okay. So I am one of the people that has had to learn and continues to learn. And as a leader, when you have this wisdom for yourself, you can then impart this onto your team, and that will have a profound impact on the outcomes of your team, the experience of your team, the turnover, everything in that environment will shift when you start to understand this, and then you can model it and teach it to your team. So I think it's extremely important, even though it sounds like the soft skills and the fluffies and whatnot, but it is the wisdom. Okay. You cannot check boxes on this one and say, oh, I did my leadership, coaching. This is truly about you internally as a human being. And when you do this as a leader, it will impact I promise you, every other aspect of your life. You will have better outcomes, and you will have a better experience getting those outcomes. And of course, you're going to work with us to learn how to do this.
Couldn't help
right?
yourself, huh?
It's the last pitch. All right, we're at the end here. Any parting words, wisdom?
You just said them.
I just said them. All right, so we will be back here next Tuesday-ish.
See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.